This region fuels Africa's largest economy, yet many who live here remain among its poorest. The Niger Delta is rich in oil, but scarred by decades of extraction, neglect, and broken promises. When peaceful demands failed, resistance took a different form. Armed groups rose. The state responded with force. What followed was not just a security crisis, but a struggle over who benefits from wealth, who bears the cost, and who gets to decide the future. This is the story of oil, power, and resistance in the Niger Delta. The Niger Delta is one of the most oil-rich regions on Earth. Its rivers, creeks, and wetlands sit atop vast reserves that transformed Nigeria into Africa's largest oil producer and a major player in global energy markets. But for the communities who lived there, oil did not bring prosperity. Instead, decades of extraction reshaped the land itself. Oil spills seeped into farmland. Gas flaring poisoned the air. Fishing waters, once central to daily life, became polluted and unreliable. Traditional livelihoods declined, while infrastructure such as roads, schools, and healthcare lagged far behind. Revenue flowed outward. Profits went to multinational oil companies and the federal government in Abuja, while many Delta communities saw little improvement in living conditions. The wealth beneath their feet rarely translated into opportunity above ground. Over time, oil became a symbol, not of progress, but of loss. Long before guns appeared, there were petitions and protests. Community leaders and activists demanded environmental protection, fair compensation, and development. These demands were often ignored, delayed, or dismissed. As years passed without meaningful change, frustration hardened, anger grew quietly, and in the creeks of the Niger Delta, a conflict began to take shape, long before it ever turned violent. In the 1990s, activism in the Niger Delta gained momentum. Environmental groups, youth movements, and community organizations called for accountability. They demanded compensation for damaged land, political inclusion, and a fair share of oil revenue. These movements were largely peaceful and rooted in civic engagement, but again and again they were sidelined. Unemployment rose sharply among young people. Trust in government institutions collapsed. Many began to believe that dialogue had failed and that peaceful protest carried no cost for those in power. Out of this frustration, a new phase emerged. Militant groups began to form across the Delta. They claimed to represent marginalized communities and demanded local control over resources. Their tactics were designed to force attention. Attacks on pipelines, sabotage of oil facilities, and kidnappings of oil workers. To supporters, these militants were defenders of the land, filling a vacuum left by the state. To the government, they were criminals, threatening national security and economic stability. The conflict had crossed a threshold. What began as environmental resistance was now an armed struggle, reshaping the region and drawing Nigeria into a dangerous confrontation with itself. For the Nigerian government, militancy in the Niger Delta was more than a local crisis. Oil revenues funded a large portion of the national budget. Any disruption threatened public spending, currency stability, and international confidence. The stakes extended far beyond the creeks. The state responded with force. Security operations expanded. Joint military task forces were deployed across the Delta. Patrols intensified along waterways, and militant camps were targeted in coordinated raids. Some operations weakened armed groups. but they also carried heavy costs. Civilians often found themselves caught between militants and security forces. Entire communities experienced raids, displacement, and fear. For many residents, the state felt distant when services were needed and overwhelming when force was applied. Violence disrupted oil production and rippled outward, briefly shaking global energy markets. Each cycle of attack and retaliation hardened positions on both sides. By the late 2000s, it was clear that militarization alone could not resolve the conflict. The Niger Delta had reached a breaking point. In 2009, the Nigerian government changed course. An amnesty program was introduced. Militants were offered pardons, monthly stipends, education, and job training in exchange for surrendering weapons. Thousands accepted the deal. The impact was immediate. Violence dropped sharply, oil production rebounded. For the first time in years, a sense of calm returned to the Delta. The program was widely seen as a success, at least on the surface. But the peace was fragile. Many former militants struggled to reintegrate into civilian life. Promised development projects moved slowly. Environmental damage, one of the root causes of the conflict, remained largely unresolved. Over time, new groups emerged, arguing that corruption, inequality, and neglect had not changed. The conflict did not vanish, it evolved. The amnesty ended open warfare, but it did not settle the deeper grievances beneath it. The Niger Delta conflict is not only about oil or militancy. At its core, it is about governance, trust, and how states manage wealth and diversity. It shows how natural resource abundance can become a curse when benefits are unevenly shared and communities feel excluded from decision-making. The conflict also reveals the limits of military solutions to political and social problems. Force can suppress violence, but it cannot repair broken relationships or restore damaged land. Most importantly, the Niger Delta raises questions that resonate far beyond Nigeria. Who owns natural resources? How should wealth be distributed? And what happens when communities believe they have no stake in the future? The Niger Delta remains vital to Nigeria's economy and identity, but lasting peace will require more than force or temporary agreements. It will require accountability, inclusion, and repair, both environmental and political.